Let's go.
We're
And we
here.
are live. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm with Shelley Robinson. She's a multi-year veteran in the multifamily side of things. We had a conversation about a week ago talking about Hell Yes, and that kind of emerged and grew into, oh, we really got to share this thinking with the rest of the world. Some interesting things about Shelley. She is a master musician, multiple instruments, and DJ. I got a chance to listen to her SoundCloud stream, which was pretty awesome. So always good to kind of like dig in on people with that kind of background. I think it's the CEO of Goldman Sachs is also a underground club DJ. So there you go.
I love that. That is awesome. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
So there
Cool.
you go. I am at the Austin Apartment Association's head office today, so I had a chance to borrow some of their real estate to do this. So I'm grateful for them. And Shelley, why don't you get a quick intro to yourself, what you're up to, and we'll get going on getting to Hell Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to be invited. And like you said, I've been in multifamily and prop tech for a minute. I actually started out as a leasing consultant just a few years ago, and worked my way into kind of being a lease up specialist as a property manager, then got into marketing roles and operational leadership roles. And about 8 years ago, I actually pivoted into prop tech at RealPage. So I led the strategic customer success teams for some of their clients, and had the privilege to really get what I think is a really unique lens on the industry while I worked there, where you got to see owners, operators, vendors. You got to kind of see a whole picture of the industry. So it was nice to leverage my experience as an operator and a marketer, and then use that in prop tech. I've always been a kind of a digital enthusiast. So that's how I got to
Well,
today. Yeah, go ahead.
excellent. I mean, it is interesting to see people like there's an inevitability around tech in
Hmm.
every industry. I mean, that's not nothing new to anybody. There's, imagine tech enable some of the simplest things on the planet right now. There's a tech enabled air fryer and a Bluetooth, whatever, like all those
Cool.
things exist. And it is the operations function in prop tech is where we're feeling a lot of pain right now with
Mhm.
respect to just shortages on the people side. And then on the NOI side, there's pressure on OpEx to become more performant. And so
Yeah.
it's an interesting, the answers are usually typically fall into one of three buckets, right? Hire more people, outsource it, or use technology. And I think we're drifting to a lot towards technology to answer some of those questions. But what's interesting with respect to the podcast and getting to Hell Yes is trying to figure out why people commit to change, right? And your experience, software, consulting, bringing people along, you know, and I guess there's two questions here is today, I'll kind of frame it for today. Today, who is your ideal buyer for what's the problem you solve? Actually, we'll start with that. What's the problem you solve today for your prospects, your customers, this market?
So I think you're actually speaking directly to the problems that I'm working to solve. There's plenty of pain, and so my ideal buyer is ready and willing to make changes. They're tired of the status quo on the pain, whether that's staffing or looking at staffing differently, or perhaps looking at ways to have more out of their software, that it has performs more, or they get the benefit of NOI out of the software that they're using, or they get the benefit of a cost savings, or they can save money elsewhere. But that key competency is a willingness as a founder of a prop tech company, or an ownership group, or a multifamily operator, is that they're ready and willing to look at things differently and not say that this problem has always been here. One example is, oh, it's just common. We have 70% turnover for property managers at our site level. And everybody just accepts that as the statistic
Yeah.
for our industry. It really doesn't have to be that way. It can change. And so I think we have to look at things differently. So my ideal buyer has that core competency of they're ready and willing to address the pain and believe that there are answers. And I work on engagements where we actually look at the problem and we look at the desired outcome, and we come up with a plan to execute on that desired outcome. But they have to be willing to try something different and try something new, and change the way they're doing business.
I find the adage, and again, I don't know if this is actually the truth or not, but it's a saying. This is the whole boiling frog thing, where if the temperatures gradually and incrementally increase without a shock, the boiling frog will stay in the boiling pot. Again, don't even bother fact checking me on this or not. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's just a saying. But ultimately, it's that degree of change that forces people to create, to commit to action. So, in your experience, for your ideal buyer, what are you reading for? Like, if you were to sort, right, your prospects, or sort your incredibly successful customers, what degree of change happened that initialized their commitment to change? Because like we've seen, here's an example, or kind of the backdrop behind it, right? We've been through 7 years of a great business cycle where we were able to raise rents successfully. And admittedly, I think it was largely a good strategy, was to kind of like disregard OpEx and focus on acquisition, logos, geographies, et cetera, buildings,
Mhm.
and try and satisfy the land grab. But now that the land grab era is basically over, and now we're moving into operational excellence cycle, until we get to opportunity for these things to happen. And what's interesting is that we're moving into an operational excellence cycle at the same time as a ton of pressure to bring on more supply
Yeah,
for obviously housing and affordability issues. So that's
yep,
unique, because
it
typically when you
is.
go into an OpEx cycle, it's because you're getting a compressed demand for your supply. But the reality is the demand for supply is going up. The problem is we can't operationally execute with the kind of like conventional operating models. So the pressure really is on an operating model to change.
It
And
is.
what do you see that they're responding to? Is it, as an example, compressed NOI, cash calls to investors? Is it refinancings that are happening? Is it survey results on, pick your surveys, your survey platform? Like, what is actually saying to them, we can't tolerate this any longer. We're going to commit. We're going to draft the project, and we're going to solve this problem.
I think it's all of the above, Guillermo. You're spot on with all of the themes in the industry right now. All of those things are hitting the industry hard. And I think everybody's taking a look at their business. Everyone I talk to is taking a hard look at their business as it operates today and really trying to figure out where to go next. And so they're seeking real solutions. And I would say the people that are pulling the trigger are actually ready. They're in enough pain, right? To me, the staffing
Mhm.
crisis that is going on, the retention, the attraction. I got into the industry by a happy accident many years ago, and I think that's still happening too much, right?
Mhm.
But they're ready. They're ready to make a change and actually try to address those problems. Some companies are leveraged better than others, so it's less capital call, but more about pressure from their investment groups to optimize and really thoughtfully look at what can be. And then I think on the prop tech side, because I work with both sides, I work with prop tech companies and owner operators. On the prop tech side, there's some really agile companies that are coming up that are really solving some great industry challenges through automation. Your company as well. So that
Mhm.
automation, that really looking at what can be, taking things off people's plate that can be solved through automation, that to me is um, a big winning strategy moving forward. What could be? How, maybe we don't need to have as many staff members. Maybe we can, take 40% off of their plate. So those are the different triggers I think they're all looking at, and then coming up with business plans. I think the larger the organization, the more difficult it is to be agile and make those changes. So I think it happens slower
Mhm.
the larger the organization is. But firms that are in that 10,000 unit range to 20,000 unit range can generally make those decisions and changes in a much more agile, faster fashion.
I would also kind of to support that statement, like the decision makers are closer to the pain.
They
Like
are.
they may be the ones that are, the third phone call on the long weekend or whatever it is, right? They're seeing the people that are stressing it out. They're not insulated by layers of management. It's
Yes.
people that they care about and their families, and so they often have to, it's a difficult problem to ignore.
Hmm.
Um, I know what we're seeing when we talk to folks in the market is, there is this thing that's interesting about real estate, is that there's regional autonomy. There's often regional autonomy on decision making,
Hmm.
for one reason or another, right? Or at least maybe it's how the companies were acquired and brought into a bigger brand. And so we're trying to crack the nut kind of like on two sides of it. So definitely like those that are more agile and willing to adopt, or like at that 10,000 to like say 20,000 unit range. The problem is big enough; they've got to do something about it, and there's enough at stake if they don't solve the problem that they've got to resolve the situation. On the And so we're finding is that the larger organizations at the regional level, there's still some time to try something different because the pain might be more intense at that region. And
Yeah.
so the conversation of, hey, I'm in Austin. Hey, Austin, why are the numbers where they are right now? You've got independent clients, or we're an owner operator, and we're feeling the pain there. What can we do within your market that needs to solve that particular problem for that market? And so there is a wedge there. I agree in that there's a little few extra layers of kind of like just like saran wrap you got to go through to get to um, a commitment to change, because there is insulation at the company level, but it all depends sometimes on how people get paid, right?
Right.
Like often I ask the question, like, how do you get paid? And then they go, well, this, and this. And like, okay, now we're locked in on how we can solve your problem because I
Yeah.
understand your compensation model and your variable or flex or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes it's that easy, right? It's figuring out, okay, how do you get paid and how can we, how does this affect how are you personally at stake? Because one thing that I've also noticed is the flip side is also true, is that for someone to choose to buy from a smaller company and I say a non-incumbent, like your former employer, like that is also risky. So it's incumbent of us to make it, and this is again an expression I borrowed from somebody else, as aerodynamic as possible to be bought. So how can we recommend you start small. We actually don't recommend you buy, you know, all the seats or all the doors you possibly can out of the gates, because we know that the decision making framework is such that it's risk adverse, right? And that's just being a human being.
Yeah. You're going to like a pilot, right? Having a thoughtful pilot
Mm-hmm.
at first.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's so important to test and pilot and be open to that in an entrepreneurial fashion in your sales cycle as well. And then also making it as easy as possible with your service model of what are you offering to make this lift as easy as possible for your client. That change is hard, and really owning that change management process is super important in your sales process as well.
It's an interesting analog, right? Like if we want to sell to agile people, we have to have a product that's kind of got its own agility built into it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so it has to be easy to experiment on, has to be easy to buy. And again, with respect to the comment of getting to hell yes, like if we make it, and again, the temptation as a seller is trying to get the biggest bill of materials as possible out of the gates. That can be
mm,
very counterproductive with respect to logo acquisition, where you've got to actually find the fit and understand, again, gets to the buyer's journey. Like why wouldn't they do this? Like, one of the questions we've got for this call is often like, what objections do you hear?
yeah,
What are they trying to solve? Because like, if we focus too much on the value, also the value formula that we're delivering, often it's actually not going to stick. So
that's
when someone is looking to solve, like what often, the buyer has so much information now, and they can
they do.
seek to understand prior to engaging with you or with us. What are they typing into Google when they find you?
That's really interesting, and I'm learning more about this, and I thought this call was timely for me too. While I'm even working on my, finalizing my own sales process. I think it's always evolving, right? I don't I hear people are using AI more, right? Using Claude and using
Mhm.
Chat GPT for research. And I think that's a place to start if you're on the client side looking for information. I think Google is becoming more and more, I don't want to say obsolete, but if you're really trying to do research on your problems, I think people are going to Chat GPT or Claude or any of these other ones
Mhm.
and starting to research there. And I think they're putting in, what their problem is. And I try to, with my LinkedIn content, always start with the problem and then always start with the ways that you're typically trying to solve that problem today. And so I think they'll research. It's definitely not exhaustive enough. And then I think people turn to LinkedIn, right? You're then turning to LinkedIn for that
Mhm.
more deep expertise that you're looking for. And I find that they end up finding my content that way because they're searching for answers through what they're not finding on Google or on Claude or on
Mhm.
ChatGPT. So whatever their problem is, whether that's staffing and attraction or NOI, looking for cost savings, I think they're searching for answers, and then industry conversations. Multifamily is very still much a relationship conversation driven industry. Through their
Mhm.
network,
Mhm.
they talk to people they know. They talk to their associates at their former colleagues at different companies, and research that way as well. That crowd source of information through those local conversations.
What I love about this industry is the conversations exist.
They
Like, there are
do.
many industries where the conversations are shut down,
Hmm.
and I find that, like, and again, like, we're catching on the work that other people have done with respect to this podcast and even our language and messaging. But there is a group of people that, Paul Marks, I don't know how long he's been on the radio, but, like, he's on the radio. Like,
Yeah,
just think of that. Like, he's like the original podcaster. And,
yeah,
like, talking about multifamily on AM radio every week, like, that's the original, profit with respect to sharing information in this industry.
yes,
And, thankful for people like him to start this kind of, like, it's safe to talk about the problems that we're going through, because otherwise we would never have access. I mean, as a seller, we would never have access to audiences because there'd be discomfort in sharing problems and solutions in an open forum. But
yeah.
it's very, very common. Like, there's a bunch of different networks, and you're part of multimedia. Is multimedia network your
I
podcast?
am. My first
Is it
episode
right?
actually launches this Sunday for Prop Tech Pulse. So thanks for bringing that up.
Wonder Prop Tech Pulse. And so, like, there's just a bunch of evangelists in the market that are, and actually, like, are what I'm happy to see is that they've got sustainable income generating enterprises by evangelizing the problems. And I
Yes.
just, often I ask in this podcast, how do you get paid? Because it's important that everyone understands the monetary motivation behind people's actions. And
Yeah.
so, Paul, Chris Moreno, Adrian, like, all these guys are out of Houston. Oh, he's gonna kill me. Anyways, the guys that are out there evangelizing the problems in the market, they're doing such a good job at stirring up the coals to allow for an
Yes.
organic and friendly conversation. Like, I am, forever grateful that this exists, that somebody can come in with ideas from the different verticals and learn so fast,
Yes.
because and understand the industry an I'll say an abnormal rate because of the activity and the intentionality behind the conversations. So when
Mhm.
we're trying to find getting to hell yes, I have to guess less, right? Like, I have to guess less because I'm able to learn from what other conversations other people are having. And
So
so,
true.
like, those networks in the market are so helpful. And then, like, and as we kind of start to narrow down our conversation, and then we come in in a non-assumptive position, right? We actually listened to done the effort. Like, I don't think there's any excuse to not learn in this industry, because there's so many people that are openly put their hands up and talking about the problem.
Absolutely. It's so important
It's
that we keep that communication open, and you're completely spot on with the facilitators of that. And Paul Marks, he actually gave me the courage to actually do my first podcast. He's an icon, right? I was totally uncomfortable at first. And he's like, "No, you got this." And now I'm a host. So, you've got these people bringing other people forward, serving it forward, and actually really honing in on the industry issues. So it's incredibly valuable.
What's interesting is that I've got Paul coming on in within a couple weeks here, and he's like, "But I'm not a buyer or seller." I'm like, "Paul, you've talked to thousands of people,
Yes.
and you've been delivering value to this market, as a leader forever and ever and ever. You've probably learned and dismissed more ideas than anybody in this industry, at this point. And so the conversation that you're able to offer is from both sides of of the coin, because you've talked to operators, you've talked to owners, you've talked to technology companies, and
Yes.
and you understand, probably have a subconscious understanding on what hell yes looks and feels like, because that's not the business that you deliver, but you probably know it better than other people. It's like in music, he could probably hear a flat note in the middle of an orchestra, um,
Yeah.
whereas other people just think it's, auto tune. You know what I mean?
Oh, right. Oh, you're totally right. It's that expertise I think all of us start to take for granted. That's really needed. We shouldn't take for granted that expertise that Paul's honed on it for years. We've all been honing on it for years, and it's needed to bring the industry forward. I think we're all working to bring the industry forward together through all of our efforts.
And what's interesting is that it does take a moment of crisis to create an opportunity for all of these things to blossom. If it
Yep.
was, a perpetuation of just increased rents and revenue does smooth or hide all problems, then we would never be in this position. So, every business
Mhm.
has an arc to it. Everything in Mother Nature has an arc to it. There's a winter, there's a spring to every winter kind of thing. And like these moments are when companies, it separates the performers from those that were kind of like faking their way through it. And it's going to be really special to see how the market looks in like 18, 24, 36 months, because there will be some winners and there will be some losers. And it'll be very obvious in retrospect.
I think you're spot on. It's the lean times where you get that efficiency. You're going to do even better the next season of rent growth and the next season of revenue growth, and be ready for it. And I think that is the companies that I don't hear talking about solving these problems, I worry for. It is a really critical time to figure out where multifamily's operating model is supposed to go. And I love seeing companies like yours and others that are really focusing on that automation, really honing in on how to make things more optimal. To me, the big theme is around simplification when it comes to
Mm.
prop
Oh
tech,
yeah.
comes to the job that you do. We should all be questioning every single task that people do on a property day to day, and how can we make their lives better and easier so they can serve their residents. And so I love seeing companies like yours and others that are really honing in on that simplification and making the work about a different work. When I started out in leasing, I had a fax machine and I used to FedEx packages overnight. That was my efficiency. Things have changed and they should continue to change and evolve. And there's a lot of tools and ways to make that possible now, really solve those
Yeah.
problems.
Well, and it's interesting, like from the like just to pull on the automation thread, like when we talk about alternatives, right? So one thing that we always kind of address in our conversations with buyers is like, okay, what have you tried, right? Because it's important. Well, for starters, we're always learning. Like we're not at hell yes yet, right? And so we're
Yes,
still working through the conversations around what the. And I don't think you ever get to hell. It's like an asymptote, right? You approach infinity, but you never actually achieve it.
it's
And
so true.
like you have to have that friction along the way so that you can begin to become better as a seller solver, right?
Mhm.
And like our conversations, we ask, what have you tried? And I find that like by asking that question, it actually helps me refocus on the problem that they're trying to solve. And what they've tried informs me on the problem.
Yes,
Because it
it
could be,
absolutely
you know, like when you look at your business, what have people tried
does.
before, they choose Shelley's team?
So I would say on the prop tech engagement side, many times, and what I'm seeing is people are coming into prop tech because they see the opportunity and they try to solve it with people who are not from the industry. And I think you have to have a perfect blend of both. I think there's
Mhm.
much to be offered from people outside the industry. So I'm not saying that. But many times, if you try that without someone with that deep expertise, your cost is very high. You're making mistakes
Mhm.
that could be prevented. So trying to solve that through industry expertise and relying on that blend to really solve the problem of both types of expertise, I think is a really winning combination that we can offer. So that's one thing on the prop tech side. And then I would say on the multifamily side, I'd say traditionalists, and I use that word, it's the traditional model is how they're trying to solve it. Traditional recruiting, traditional
Mhm.
retention, traditional benefits. To me, engaging in a performance-based model where you look at everything. How are you incentivizing people? Are you aligning to ownership goals? So I think looking at away from being those traditional solutions of we've always done it this way, that's what people are trying. My HR department went out and recruited at X. Well, you have to look at it differently. We tried cutting costs. It didn't work. Well, let's look at it differently. Now it's time to look at leveraging ways to automate or cut your help desk by 40%. There's so many ways
Mhm.
now that you look at things differently with tools, automation, tools that actually leverage AI in a way that's actually value creation through that AI and time savings and reduction. A lot of those traditional methods just aren't cutting it anymore. Traditional teams looking at, you know, sending out crisis help rather than really looking at success planning for a property is another area. We band-aid
Mhm.
things rather than have a plan.
And you have a ton of expertise in this success-based model. Like, that must scare the shit out of an operator because now they're at risk fees, right? It's not
Yeah,
just collected fees. Like, it is like that is a to put that kind of like chips in the game. I just can't. So there's an example of like a what appears to be a small change on the surface that has a trickle down into every single decision you would do as an operator. So share a little bit on the performance model and how it's different than the fee-based model that's out there.
and I don't feel like this should be a controversial topic. There are ownership groups begging for the property management companies to align their models with the goals of their portfolio, begging for it. But I think we get so stuck in the way we've always done things that we just, here's our model. This is how we charge fees. But to me, if you've got, I'll give an example. When I started out in leasing, I was making $100 to $150 a move in a long time ago. And that model really hasn't evolved. And when you think about, especially out here in Northern California, you've got someone leasing $7,000 a month apartments. The incentives should align with that model. So that's just kind of one example of one position. I think you have to really look at the goals, the ownership goals for those properties and those portfolios as an operator, and align your teams to that. The career plans need to match it, the incentives need to match it. If you want low turnover, you've got to incentivize that team to reach those goals. And too many times we have a budget, but no roadmap on the budget. Here we have to have
Mhm.
3%, revenue growth, and we have to have 3% maintenance cost growth, but we're not really thinking about what is the goal for this particular property as an owner. Is the goal to hold on to it indefinitely? Is the goal to reposition it? Is the goal to sell it in 18 months? Everybody from the operator side all the way down to your groundskeeper should all be aligned to the performance of that property and what it takes to get there. So I have a model that's a performance plan, a property success and performance plan that takes a look and starts with the end in mind and really flips it on his head from fees to outcomes. So I think
Mhm.
the industry as a whole, and that really comes from a customer success model in prop tech, to be frank.
Mhm.
You start with the end in mind. What are the goals? And then you work backwards and you make sure everybody is incentivized to what that outcome needs to be. And it's amazing what people can accomplish when they have clarity on the why for where they're working and they feel like they're coming into work and they can actually get paid for that and make a difference.
So when do you start introducing that like in the engagement conversation? I mean, when you have that first call, or maybe is it later on? Like, like when do you start asking that question of I mean, the obvious answer is the first conversation, but it doesn't always work that way. There's got to be some sort of a frame as to why we're sitting here together. But how do you probe for that and then keep that ball as the topic of every conversation? Like, what strategy you use to make sure that we're focused on we have mutual agreement. I like the word agreements, a mutual agreement around the objective, and keep on reminding it, because we end up losing sight of the objective a lot of times.
Yeah. You get lost in the, I think with many conversations as this is my emergency today. I want you to solve my emergency today. And I can be engaged and help you solve your emergency. And I think I should. But at the same time, you have to continue to ask the questions of why is it this way? Why do we have this emergency? I had a leader when I was at Avalon Bay, Jay Ward, who would always, he's like, you have to ask why at least 7 times on any conversation until there's no more why
Mhm.
left. So you have to get to the pain and you have to get to the discomfort of the pain and be incredibly comfortable with the discomfort in the conversation. So I think too many times we
Yep.
just want to solve the emergency. Sometimes you have to sit in those conversations and just let the silence sit there and let them hear themselves with the pain that they're saying that they have. Like it doesn't have to be this way. So
Mhm.
for performance modeling, I think it's a long road ahead. I think this topic is not going away. I think it also fits into automation and centralization. I think it's time to rip the band-aid off and approach all of it. But sometimes you got to engage on the emergencies, continue to share the why that they've shared and their pain, and remind them that that pain is actually solvable and you can continue to grow that engagement. First, solve the small problems or the current issue, the emergency, but continue to share the why of how that could be prevented in the first place and get a full engagement plan together for it. But you do have to look at the appetite for each client with where they're at
It,
today.
it, it is interesting because like sometimes they have like we'd have and I think it's happened to us once at Iris, maybe twice, but certainly in my consulting career, there was like initiatives that would be spun out for kind of initiatives for initiative's sake, like
Yes.
that weren't connected to actually achieving the why, and those ultimately all fizzled out. And or we do some work and feel great about the work, but it wouldn't go anywhere because there was no buy-in from the rest of the company that was all dialed in on the annual objectives, the quarterly objectives. And so like it's interesting because I had this opinion um, probably late summer. I was forming an opinion and trying to figure out why operators would change. And I hadn't done a lot of digging in and interviewing at the operator level. And so it was I'll look in retrospect, it was quite arrogant to have a perspective on the operator side of things without really digging into the nature of their business and how they make money. And like learning around like one thing I was kind of flummoxed by is like, why is there no innovation? Like I was stuck on this kind of thing. Why is nobody motivated to innovate in this business? And I kind of assigned that blame to the operators, saying, well, it's your job as a service company to innovate because the asset operators are innovating in their own little way. But then it kind of came to me, and it was a realization kind of deeper in the conversations that the motivation for change was kind of like jointly held by the owners that were allowing for kind of like consistent, I'll say complacent growth, and then the operators were just serving those responses. And so as an operator, why would you change? If your operators are completely fine with complacent growth, then you're not motivated to change. In fact, you're probably rocking the boat a little bit. And
Mm-hmm.
so now what's interesting is I think there's a collective. So apologize to the operators I chatted to back in, like 3, 4 months ago. But thank you to everyone I've chatted to since then because I've become so much more informed on the motivations and the turnover risk that operators face. And so what's really interesting now is that operators are faced with this, and it isn't just nested within owner operators, but operators themselves, the pure play operators, are being forced to differentiate in an
Yes.
otherwise kind of commodity service where their fee rates are dropping down to the floor. Like you're at 2% now for fees, maybe 2.25 or whatever. And how far are we away from zero fees? Right. So then what does that mean? So how does
Yeah.
that now when you compress this thing, you feel like you're like that scene in Star Wars where both walls are closing in and you don't know how to get out. And
Yeah.
so like that is definitely dating myself to make a Star Wars reference. But like those are those
I
that
didn't flinch.
crisis that we're in is affecting it. What's that?
I said I didn't flinch when you said Star Wars.
There you go. We all know what we're talking about. The garbage compactor scene. Um, that whole world is changing, and I think that I kind of always push it upon the service people to be the innovators because I feel like they've got at risk revenue, and so they should be motivated for change. And it didn't fully have a great understanding of kind of why would they be conditioned to change, but it's typically because they're responding to their customers. And so,
Yeah.
like as a seller, if everyone's buying what I'm selling, then I've got no reason to change. Like everyone's making their bonuses, everyone's growing. And now there's kind of like an excuse me moment where it's like, excuse me, we need to change this because this isn't working anymore. And so there's at-risk revenue from an operator side. There's at-risk returns from an owner side, and
Oh
those
yeah.
two at-risks are creating a moment of conversation where we've got to do things differently. And then, not to mention the labor side of things. This is my position. Like I think that if we didn't have this pressure on rental or occupancy and all the supply coming online and all the housing issues, if things are just cruising along, I'm pretty certain the industry would have just accepted the fact that I can't hire jobs. It would have just been
Yeah.
I can't hire jobs. It sucks. That's the way
Yeah.
it is. Happens to
Yeah.
everybody. Service is shitty. Oh, that's too bad. Well, blood deal, blood up. But now
Yeah.
we're at a point now that like it's gotten to the point that that's not acceptable any further, and it's
Mhm.
affecting rents. And I think with all this, what's interesting about the dynamic of all the supply coming online is you got to flight to quality. Where if you're revenue, so you're a renter, you're going to move to, and your B and your A spaces are worth the same, or in terms of your rent, you're going to abandon your B lease and move to your A lease. 50%. You might your
Absolutely.
renewal rates are going to be much more compressed in the C's and B spaces, and everyone's getting an upgrade. And now now the B's and the C spaces now have to upgrade to amenities to feel like that. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, because even that flight to quality from B's to A's, C's to B's is going to create pressure for operators to be innovative, because like it or not, there's more B's and C units than there are in North America than there are A's. And so like
Absolutely.
it's going to happen.
Yeah. And that goes back to you're completely spot on. The conversations there. One piece that I think continues to get missed that I bring up in all my conversations is, when is the last time you've actually talked to your site teams about how they feel? How do they feel about the service experience? How do they feel
Mhm.
about prop tech stack? How do they feel about their day-to-day roles? And I think while the owners and the operators are talking, they need to go, okay, we agree, right? We agree we have a service problem. We agree we have an efficiency problem. Now let's really bring in the site teams and get into the detail of what would make a difference in their lives
Mhm.
day to day. And I think too many times those decisions get made in a vacuum without their input. And that input is really critical. It's critical for us as vendors to know as well, because we can't solve
Mhm.
problems we don't know about as well.
There's a
So,
great exercise. There's a great exercise we do in tech, and it would be worthwhile to bring it into this space when you're having this kind of conversation. It's called the 4 L's experience, the 4 L's retrospective. And why the 4 L's is so powerful in what we do is it asks you 4 questions, and it's learned. What did you love about this this function? What do you love about it? What did you learn? What did you long for? Meaning what's missing, and what did you loathe? And the important part of having that load box is people will put something in there, and people need permission to do that. Otherwise, they won't. And what we found when we do our 4Ls retros with our customers is the greatest intel. We kind of know what they love, or at least we have, and it feels amazing to hear it, right? Like
yeah,
it's really good for the spirit. But it's the things that they put in that loathe box that we go, I see. I get it. Now I understand you better. I understand your role better, right?
yeah,
The learned things are fairly predictable because everyone's going through change the same kind of, well, especially when we deploy, they're kind of going through the same type of change.
yeah,
The longed for is good intel, but that load box, and I think that in those meetings with the site team, a good port from a different industry would give them permission to not like something,
hmm,
right? Make that box painfully empty, that you can say to them, hey, there's got to be something that's not working here,
yeah,
right? And then because like just recognizing the hierarchy of these organizations, people are uninclined to give the bad news. But if you give them a box that says here's the bad news box,
yes,
and it's important that we fill this stuff out, people will speak up. And so that's what we're finding in terms of a way to get that feedback that otherwise gets kind of like bundled, gets capped out.
yeah.
We find that experience to be very powerful.
I love that.
We need to keep. We're loving our conversation here. This is good. Um, Couple things before we kind of wrap up here.
Yeah.
What common objections do you hear how do they come up?
I think it goes back to the pressures, right? It's how much does it cost? And, if you're not really clear on what you're going to get out of the engagement, that is going to be a bigger objection. If you're doing a really good job of listening, which I don't know about you, I always have to get better at listening. I have a client I'm working with now, and we actually revised the scope 3 times because you're learning to listen better, and as you're learning to listen better, those objections will go away if you're actually solving those problems through what you're sharing. You will do so. To me, it's listen, repeat. I have to repeat back what I'm hearing, make sure I'm not missing anything, and then really focus on how we're gonna solve those problems. So to me, it's generally cost or investment. That's definitely
Mhm.
an item that comes up, especially in this environment. What are we going to get out of it? What problem is it going to solve? And if you aren't clear enough on that, then you're going to remain in that objection state. So that's an area that I am continuing to really hone in on getting better. I have a coach that I work with that really helps me in this area. I haven't been in sales per se for a while directly, so it's a newer muscle. As to how do you get where you're honing in on the objection, or the book, The Obstacle is the Way. The objection is the way, really. So if it's cost, then you have to show them the way to the value you create and actually show what they will get. What are they going to get out of it? Is it income? Is it savings? Is it efficiency? Can they cut something? Can they add something out of it? And what
Mhm.
problem is going to go away? So cost is generally the first item that comes up. And then I would
Do you ever
say,
front load? Sorry, go ahead, keep going.
uh, so the second thing I would say besides cost sometimes is timing. And
Mm.
so sometimes you'll get an objection on timing. And I think sometimes the bigger the organization, the more that comes into play. And so I really look at different ways to model out engagements that fit the needs of timing. Sometimes it's focusing on discovery at first so that you can help them get it approved. So I'm always willing to solve that problem. How do we get you to pass the timing model? Well, let me help you and write it for you. So I've even written out proposals that they can go then take to work on the timing. So I just try to solve problems with the objections.
It's interesting you mentioned the timing thing. To me, I'm starting to feel that the timing piece is the most important impact into contributor to Hell Yes. Because
Yeah.
like it is, I need to be feeling the pain right now and
Hmm.
wanting to act on it right now. And
Hmm.
what's interesting is it's very scientific, well documented how to find your ideal customer profile, all those sort of things. But the discovery of timing, like when you start hearing a lot of timing objections,
Yes.
I'm finding that it's that means I've targeted the wrong signal to that I think timing is something that we can work on as sellers with respect to who we're targeting at. And
Yeah.
it's a reflection of where they're at in the buyer's journey. If they're in the awareness stage of the buyer's journey and I'm pitching a proposal, that's kind of like on me for not listening.
Yeah. You're
And
so
so if
spot
I'm going to pitch pricing at that time, at the awareness phase, it's really just to get comfortable around budget.
on. Yes.
It isn't about closing getting a PO.
Yeah. Sometimes it's
And so do you think,
information gathering, and sometimes the pain isn't bad enough with the client yet. So that timing, you can't solve for that. You have to wait. Um, unless you
how
can
many deals
really.
in a CRM, how many deals in CRMs, and I've done this too, like just says bad timing. Like if you go through
uh,
your CRM and you got lost deals or deals that are just sitting there, like going sideways in the pipeline, and the reason the close loss reason is bad timing, it's important to go dig in those deals and figure out why the timing was off. But often
yeah.
we just dismiss it as being up, buyer wasn't ready, they're stuck in this big company land or whatever. But it's
Yeah.
actually maybe one of the most important close loss reasons to dig in on is the timing one. Because no budget, competition, okay, you may have lost those fair and square, but bad timing means that there was a misalignment
You
between
didn't
the
understand their cycle, right? Their timing, their budget cycle, their approval cycle, their ownership review cycle, which we're all in the middle of budget review right now. Like this is when
Mhm,
decisions are made for
mhm.
next year.
No, very,
So
very, very good takeaways.
yeah.
So when we talk about what I'm looking here, just what piece of advice? So someone who's going to sell in this industry, maybe starting or maybe rebooting or, going through a change, what's the one piece of advice you give them with respect to getting to Hell Yes?
I would say really spend time focusing on 100 problems that the industry faces that you can solve for. And if you really take time to really get to know the problems your customers are facing and how you can solve them, don't shortcut that. Don't try to figure that out as you go. Really spend time on, I spent a year just really honing in on what problems I felt I could even solve in the industry before I went out on my own. Figure out who you are, figure out what problems you can solve, and then really hone in on that and nothing more.
Do you ever, so just to reframe, so you said 100 problems as a starting point and then fire
Yeah.
problems, like do not solve
Yeah,
it,
it's a funnel.
Do you ever take the
Yeah.
best in the world? Do you ever take the best in the world approach at what kind of best in the world at?
I've got strength finders that I've leveraged for what I'm kind of where my strengths lie, which I think I think we all know where that's at. That's a good place to start. And then I also think reviewing LinkedIn and the problems that are being talked about is also a really good guide as you're starting to hone in on your strengths and the problems, because the answers, like you said, you can go listen to many podcasts and hear about all the problems that are going on and what are you uniquely offering to solve, and are you ready, are you ready to solve them, or what do you need to get ready to solve them, and then have a plan and get executing on that plan, and make sure it makes you feel scared and excited at the same time. That's for sure.
I completely agree with that. I think that the centralized, my story, the centralization and maintenance story wasn't a story that I created or we created. It was someone else's story that they articulated in their terms and
Yeah.
their words. And and to learn from the way that they are expressing the pain, the blockers, and the alternatives they're considering help shape our positioning. So I would completely align with that. It's like if no one else is talking about it, maybe you're inventing a problem
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not going to be in budget. So you're not going to get to Hell Yes.
It will not be in budget at all.
You know what I
Not
mean?
even a
And
little.
ultimately,
Yeah.
there's a practicality to that. That if something's not in budget, oh, we'll put it on a digital transformation. No, that's like the slush bucket of stuff that never gets started. But like, but like, it has to be attached to a problem that they've already seeking to solve, and they're seeking to budget. That's making it solve easy to buy.
Yeah.
Um, you know, excellent. Who should we talk to next?
Oh, I have got someone for you. And she'll say,
All
hell
right,
yeah. It's Stephanie
all right.
Versid. And she is,
Oh, I love
have
her out of
you,
California.
yeah, yep.
No,
She and
I've
I
heard her
worked
on a
together.
podcast. Et elle parle français aussi, alors nous pouvons parler différentes langues. You can do a bilingual podcast.
Oh, yeah. She is one of my favorite people in the industry. And she's recently been doing things on her own. And she's got so much to offer when it comes to automation, centralization, or work to rehome. And she's just a very innovative marketing leader. One of the best minds in
Oh,
multi.
I look forward to. I'm going to lever that conversation with her because yeah, I've enjoyed her conversation so far when I've heard and very very eloquent speaker with respect to very economical with her words. Like she's just like to the point. It's awesome.
She's
Very
she's
blunt
dialed in.
French. It's outstanding.
Yes.
Yeah,
She'll
yeah.
love talking
Excellent.
to you.
We'll reach out.
Awesome.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Check out the podcast. We're on Apple, on Spotify. Shelley's podcast launches. It's called
PropTech Pulse on Multifamily Media
PropTech
Network.
Pulse
Yeah.
on the multimedia. And you have a co-host?
I
You straight
don't
up.
actually. That one will just be me. I also have a house music podcast too on YouTube. So if anyone wants some underground house music conversation with us geeky producers, we all get on there and geek out as well.
Oh, that's outstanding. Well, if everybody's out there checking that out, there's two different places you can listen to more Shelley. I look forward to your podcast because I look again, as I said earlier, we are loving the conversation, the kind of the emerging kind of senate of conversations that are happening with leaders in the market allows us to usher in change. So
Love it.
appreciate you and everybody who's out there having conversations right now. So you'll be on Apple and Spotify as well. All right.
Yeah.
And your YouTube channel for the house music. You're also on SoundCloud. If If you've got kids, they'll teach you what that is.
Really?
uh, and listen to us. Subscribe on Spotify or on Apple. Look for the next one. I've got Graham Birchlau coming up on Friday. We're going to be talking about all things data and how that relates to getting to hell yes. Thank you, everybody. If you've got any comments, please put it in the chat. We will get back to it. Thank you for following. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Shelley.